guys, I'm back for another video. So I do apologize in advance for the lighting. I'm not using any natural daylight. We are recording a little bit in the evening today. And again, as you can see, I'm in my nighttime attire. So I'm wearing my husband's t-shirts, thanks to the lovely pregnancy. So this video here is going to basically focus on my pregnancy with our firstborn, which was Devante, and we did deliver him in June of 2012. And I did already release a labor and delivery video for this topic. So if you haven't seen it, I'm going to link it to the cards above on the right, I believe it's your right side. I believe it's going to be on the right side of you. When you're viewing this video, you're going to see it on the top right hand corner. And I'll also link it in the description below. So if you haven't watched the labor and delivery for this pregnancy, you can go ahead and watch it. But this is basically just going over the pregnancy. I'm not going to go over in detail with the dating and stuff. Of course, there's a lot of stuff that I don't remember. But I will go over, generalize how the pregnancy went. Did we have complications or not? And if so, what were they? So to begin on this pregnancy, I was put on some Preterm or progesterone supplements. So that basically, for some who don't know, helps keep your progesterone levels up. That can be a cause for early miscarriages. If women don't have a high enough level of that in their body will miscarry. So I tend to, I was on those in all of my pregnancies with my 3 boys. And so I had that in the first trimester. After the first trimester, I did continue to use them. And reason being is I tend to have a shorter cervix than most people. I never did get a cervical stitch put in, but I was using this. And at the time, I was also being followed by Toronto Mount Sinai Hospital. And they deal with higher risk pregnancies and complications. And they had been going through studies at the time stating that they seemed to think that there was evidence that the Preterm supplement could help with incompetent cervix or shorter cervixes. So that I was on with, again, all of my pregnancies, as with my boys, as well as this pregnancy that I'm on right now. In terms of the first trimester, even more, I did have some bleeding and spotting most of my pregnancies. Again, for me it was normal. It was not a sign of anything. And I was being monitored quite closely. I was quite sick. I had a lot of really, really bad nausea, and I did have some vomiting. My nausea went on up until about, I would say, 17 weeks of gestation, and I had a lot of food aversion. So throughout this whole pregnancy, I dealt with a lot of not really wanting meat. That was a big thing for me, and I love meat, but I had a hard time with meat in general this pregnancy. And things went quite well up until about 17 or 18 weeks, if I'm not mistaken, which is when I would have went on sick leave. I do remember specifically one day I was at work and I went to the washroom and I wiped, and I had a lot of, let's say, a lot of discharge. I won't go into detail, but very much it was a lot, and more than what I would say is considered a normal consistency. So at that point, I did go off work. I was put on kind of a little bit of a moderate rest. I had been monitored. My cervix was a bit shorter than normal, and but there was nothing that we were doing. We were just going to monitor at this point. At approximately, I think I was about 22 weeks, I did end up in the hospital with some preterm labor contractions. At the time, my doctor was away on vacation, so I had another doctor cover. She sent me out. I was transferred to Toronto Mount Sinai Hospital, where I was admitted. I would say I was there about almost a week, and then they did want me to remain in the area. So I was actually staying down there. Me and my husband stayed down there for approximately 4 weeks or so until I was given the clear to come back home. While there, I was monitored weekly. I had weekly ultrasounds. They were monitoring my cervix. It had went down quite low. I was down to about 1.7 or 1.9 centimeters, which at that in that time of pregnancy, 22 weeks is quite low. So I was kind of monitored, and I was deemed high risk for having a preterm labor and delivery. And that's how basically things went for a few weeks. So after about 4 weeks in, I was having a really hard time. I just wanted to come home, and I was given the clear to come back home, in which I did. So I had come back around, I want to say 26 weeks or so, maybe 27. At about 29 weeks, I don't remember why. I do remember them doing a fetal fibronectin test, which is also considered like an FFN. It either comes back positive or negative. A negative is much more accurate than a positive with these. Basically, if you get a positive, it's kind of an indicator that you could have be at increased risk to deliver, if I'm not mistaken, within 12 days. Now, it may be within 14 days, 10 to 14 days. And now again, I'm not positive, but that's kind of how it works. It kind of detects if you're like this kind of glue is coming off, and then that kind of states if you're at, again, increased risk for preterm labor. So I did test positive with that, and because of the issues and because of my cervical length and everything else, and I was already deemed high risk due to previous stillbirth and 2 miscarriages, my doctor thought it was best to transfer me back down to Toronto. So at that point, again, I was transferred back down to Toronto Mount Sinai Hospital. I was only there for a couple short days, and they seemed comfortable enough to say, you're good to go home. So I did spend the rest of my pregnancy here. I was on bed rest as of about 22 weeks until 36 weeks, I want to say. I was on complete bed rest, restricted privileges, basically get up to eat, shower, and go to the washroom. I was not to be up doing any activities or anything I shouldn't be doing, even, restricted on cleaning and stuff like that. I was told to just take it easy. Everything went quite well for the rest of the pregnancy. I had a little bit of sciatic nerve, nothing major. I had a little bit of swelling, just normal swelling, come about May. Again, it was hot, and my feet swelled up a little bit. Everything went quite well. Towards the end of the pregnancy, the doctor had a little bit of concerns. The baby's growth kept falling behind. So all of my boys were very small. But basically, I guess there was kind of an asymmetrical growth going on. The stomach was measuring like 3-4 weeks behind, and other parts were, so a little bit off everywhere, but a major concern was that the stomach was starting to kind of get quite behind with the rest of the body parts. We did find out that there was, I think, a little bit of a flow issue going from the placenta to the baby. It was starting to I guess just basically not be as good of the flow, and so the nutrients the baby was getting was not as good. And I was starting to have a calcified placenta, I believe is what they call it. It is quite common if you're like a smoker or whatnot. Of course, I'm not a smoker, but that does happen. And so they deemed it to think that, 37 weeks was coming around, and they thought that at this point the baby would be better to come out than to stay in. So we were getting in touch, and we were about to, we had spoke about induction. In my 37th week, I would have been about maybe 37 weeks, 3 days or so when they did the actual induction, 3 days or 4 days, somewhere around there. And I strongly remember, so I went and saw my doctor on a Thursday. That would have been my last appointment, which would have been on June 21st. And I asked him if we could do a membrane sweep, just to see if that put me into labor naturally, opposed to having to do all this medical induction, in which he agreed. So we did the sweep, and of course it doesn't work for everybody. Some it does, some it doesn't. That was done late morning or noon time, if I'm not mistaken, on the 21st of June. And throughout that day, I just tried to stay active. I went for walks. I did have some cramping on and off, some contractions on and off, nothing major. They did seem to taper off a little bit in the evening. And then I woke up in the early morning of June 22nd, 6 a.m., and I was having some regular contractions, very tolerable, but I could feel them. My husband was going to work, and I didn't tell him anything, although I felt like something was maybe happening. But he worked locally, so, I could get a hold of him. It's not a big deal. We're not far from the hospital. He wasn't far from me. So I didn't tell him nothing, didn't want to stress him out. And that same morning, I actually had an appointment up at the hospital to go speak with another doctor to sign off on the induction. So basically, when you get induced, I don't know if that's in all places, but specifically around our area, you always have a second doctor sign off on the induction and basically stating that there is a medical need for it. Because, there's a liability if there's no medical need. But so I had the appointment. So I ended up going up to the hospital. My grandma came with me. And I drove. I was having regular contractions, I would say about 6 to 8 minutes apart at that point. They were timeable for sure. I remember going to the emergency department, and I did see my doctor that morning, and I told him, I think something's happening, so I might see you later on today. So anyways, I saw the second doctor and checked me, and I believe I was at that point about 3.5 centimeters dilated. Was having regular contractions, signed me off, and I was to go down to the lab and do my blood work. That's changed. It's not like that anymore. They just do the blood work when you go into the hospital into labor. But so I went down to the lab downtown. It's about maybe 4 minutes away from the hospital drive. It's not very far. And I remember sitting there. I had to go to the washroom. I went to the washroom, and again, if you're a bit squeamish, this is a little bit too much TMI, So basically, I went to the washroom and I lost my mucus plug, blood and all. At that point, I was having contractions about 5 minutes apart. I got my blood work done and I went home. And again, I was still driving. I remember at that time driving and having to breathe through contractions. So we're sitting at around 9:30 a.m. at this point. I get home and I call my brother. I think he might have been off at the time, and I said, I just got home and I'm having contractions. I think I need to go up to the hospital. So I called my mom. My mom was going to be coming up with us too, so she made arrangements. My brother picked me up, and we picked up my mom, and we headed up to the hospital. Sure enough, I was having contractions. I was about 4.5 centimeters at that point, and I was in active labor. I decided to, once we found out and we got assessed and everything, I decided to call my husband and let him know what was going on, and he made his way over within I would say a couple of hours. So throughout the day, as you will see clips of in the video, you don't see much of the earlier stages. So what is in that labor and delivery video, you're probably seeing around 4 or 5 o'clock, somewhere around there is where that footage started. That's when I was a little further along. I went in with a very open mind. I didn't know what to expect. It was my first full term baby delivery. I obviously had that stillborn delivery, but it was totally different. And I went in with an open mind in terms of what I was going to do with pain medication. I had always been a little bit freaked out about an epidural. It was not ever something that had crossed my mind that I was totally wanting unless I really needed, or I felt, of course, an emergency happened and it was for the best. But the pain was getting unbearable. I did have at the time, I believe at the time what they used to give then was morphine, but I'm allergic to that, so I had Demerol. And that wasn't cutting it, so I decided to ask for an epidural. That was about, I want to say maybe 4 o'clock. I don't remember exactly, but so the anesthesiologist came in and prepped me to do it, and it didn't work. It did freeze me a little bit, like in the back area, but I still like felt everything else. So I'm guessing it's just that freezing to get that needle in that I felt. But he had missed and would have had to move up the spine so many inches or however they work, centimeters, and try again. I think at that point I got a little bit scared. I knew what to expect in terms of what it felt like, and I decided, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to pull through. So I continued on with just my pain medication in my IV, and basically that's how things went. So I ended up delivering at 8:07 p.m. that night, and at about 9 centimeters dilated. In the last few hours, my contractions were very back to back. At about 9 centimeters dilated, the doctor checked me and said that my bag of waters was just sitting in front of the baby's head. Therefore, he gave us the option. Either we break it would probably speed things up, or we just let things go, which could take a while still. So he did end up breaking my water, and of course that sped everything up. I believe he broke it. It was maybe 7:30, 7:45. It didn't take long by the time he broke my water and by the time I delivered. Things went very fast. So again, he broke my water, and not long after I delivered. With all of my boys, I had very short push time, so I think I pushed about maybe 10 minutes, and then our son had arrived. The delivery itself went well. There was no complications. He did very well. And myself, recovered quite well from that. That's basically how everything went. In the upcoming days and months, I felt pretty good. I was quite emotional. I did cry a lot, but I wouldn't say to a point like that it was a postpartum depression or anything. I think it's just those hormones fluctuating. Like simply somebody could say, "How are things going?" And I would just start bawling. But I was very happy, and things were quite well. Really, I had things went very well. We were very happy. We finally had a baby in which, after 3 consecutive losses, we thought we may not ever experience. We had those moments where, is this gonna ever happen? Are we ever going to be parents? Ourselves in a natural way without having to go through maybe some kind of intervention or adoption. And basically, so it was a good moment in our life, and that's how things are. So again, that's my pregnancy in a nutshell. If you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. Just leave the comments below. If we have a lot of questions, we can do a separate Q&A on them, or I'll just answer individually to all of them. I do again want to thank everyone for their support. Again, I'm pretty new to this vlogging. Been doing about 1 week now, and I've released a few videos, and I have had amazing support from every single one of you, whether it be friends or family that I know, or even complete strangers. So again, I just want to thank you all. And again, if you have not saw, I already did release the labor and delivery video with this pregnancy with our firstborn son. I'll link it in the description below, and again up in the right corner you'll see a little pop-up, an eye with a little circle around it. You click on that, it's going to bring you directly to that video. I do have a couple more videos coming in terms of pregnancy with my 2 other boys. Unfortunately, we didn't get any video footage for those labors. I do have this upcoming pregnancy, which we could be delivering any day now. Things are progressing. I'm not going to give too much detail. We have separate videos coming on that, and we will be recording this labor. So stay tuned. We have some things coming, and we will be recording a day in our lives. So basically, what a typical day is in this household, especially during the week. We are very routine. So stay tuned. We have some upcoming things. And again, I want to thank you all for watching, and have a good evening.